So it is fascinating. And speaking, so I've had a really incredible reconnection with him because he's a conservative, and we haven't seen eye to eye, and I have been
Oh,
a
that's
progressive most
beautiful.
of my life, but always kind of off at an oblique angle from regular Dems, and have not been happy with the corporate Democrats, and what
Mhm.
I've seen to be, whenever the right said, "Oh, the leftist media," and whenever the right said that, I'm like, wow, I don't identify with that at all, because I'm left of establishment left, which is
Mhm.
a completely different thing, as you know.
Right.
Um, and so I've been looking at the news for years, and I'm going, that doesn't, from a point of view of the left, most of that doesn't resonate with me at all. So I didn't identify with this, the left leaning media, but of course it's really become obvious of late. And so it's interesting to kind of rekindle a relationship with my father out of, some common observations about what was going on with COVID, which I was never expecting that. But
What a nice surprise,
it was a really nice surprise. And, he was suspicious of it for the same reasons many of us were. It just
Yep.
didn't sound right. It just sounded too pat.
Mhm.
Just all the fear-based programming and the death counts. But then I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday who um, started out as a liberal, is now more of a conservative, though he's also kind of not on the bimodal graph, I think, either. He's because all of us kind of are taking bits and pieces of things that we see. He's a classical liberal, and he believes in some conservative things, but he also is looking at the world. He goes, there are some things that we definitely need to improve, and he's very much into Game B, the whole Game B thing, which is going beyond rivalrous games and being able to create an economy. He's interested in creating an economy that is not based on, the uh, win lose game A kind of scenario. So it's actually kind of fascinating. But his parents can't, started out, he said, as Democrats, and have his family's kind of mutated over to Republican over the course of time. And they, oh no, I'm sorry, the other way around. They started as conservatives, and they've kind of
More liberal.
evolved into being Democrats. And they can't hear a single thing he says about COVID or the election.
Wow.
And if you hear him talk, he's not any kind of rabid kind of, you got to believe what I say. He's a very gentle soul, and he's just kind of like, hey, would you be willing to listen to an alternative viewpoint? Maybe some people are seeing something different than you. Would you, could you? And he said, his mom and sister walked out of the room when he even suggested that there could be some kind
Another
of a
viewpoint that might have
heterodox
some.
view, on the election, for example, or on COVID or anything else. And anyway, but let's
Hey,
take a little bit of a kind of a breather, and just like for in case we share this, to have you introduce yourself and just share a minute about kind of how you find yourself here, and I've sort of half done that, but I'll go ahead and do the same once you've done that. Just kind of like how we're coming upon this conversation, and kind of a little bit about where you are and a little bit about what you've done, and hopefully we can weave more of that in as the conversation goes on.
sounds like a plan.
Go ahead.
So, first of all, I'm delighted to be here with my new emerging best bud, John Michael. We've been connected here for the last year or so, and knew each other before that. It goes way back. And we've both been on a very interesting path, I'd say. Um, I started out very conservative family, Irish Catholic, uh, Episcopal, Baptist, Universalist, Buddhist, Zoroaster. Uh, I've had a path, and it's been trying to find that joyous, loving, creative place that has always been my center, and having to discover how much of me wasn't me. No blame or judgment here, but growing up our parents, the schools I went to, the people I hung out with, um, fitting into that, wanting to be part of this world, and always giving a lot of weight to what other people seem to feel was real or I should be doing or not doing. So it wasn't until I was in my probably 20s or late or even early 30s when I started to wake up. And I'd finished my undergraduate work in business administration at Babson, did my graduate work after I finished my tour in the Navy as a reserve officer in the US Navy, at University of Rhode Island in counseling and education, and began to just question things, and realized that the business world, as much as I valued it and valued my dad, it really wasn't my path, but I didn't have a clue. I never thought about what my path might be. So I had a couple of amazing experiences out in Esalen in California, did some counseling, ended up starting a birthing center as part of the family business, and they thought I was insane. But I started to really look at what is life and what is life in this country. And I looked at all our systems, our education system, our legal system, our medical system, our financial system, and I was realizing they're all based on control and separation. And yet, when I was in nature and I saw how everything was connected, I felt like, how is it we have these systems that are separate? And so that began my journey. Started with birth, and then fast forward, Vermont. I moved here with my family to raise my kids, and left the family business, very traumatic, disowned, wouldn't have spoken to for 8 years. And thank God it was managed to persist, and we repaired everything. And my dad and I, got to repair everything, and he passed. And moved to Vermont, met my wife of now almost 38 years, who had started the first healing center on the East Coast called Pathways to Wellbeing in Burlington, and the Women's Health Center. So she was manifesting what I was exploring. And I did a lot of training, a lot of body mind work, meditation work, and eventually ended up setting up a nonprofit for elder care about 15 years ago. And I retired from that a year ago, basically changing how our community cares for our elders. Because to me, it was criminal what was happening. And this pharmaceutical-based illness care system was not healthcare. And so we went with a very simple premise. Our elders have lived their lives, given their best, and, throwing them in a room in front of a TV set, getting delivered meds 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, that's not right. And I've been blessed to travel the world, India and Egypt and all over South America. And how elders are treated is with reverence. And when you get to be 50, 60, 70, whatever, that's when you give your gift back to the community and you're taken care of. So that's what my journey has been up until about a year ago. And I also have had a side business that works with environmental integrity in terms of our soil, our water, communities, farming, agriculture, and also from a very metaphysical perspective, I'm interested in projects that can help wake up and support people. So when people say, who are you? What do you do? Simply, I'm a social architect and I'm a midwife. I've learned the most in life from midwives. How to be present, knowing that there's going to be fear and pain and challenge, but the result is a birth. And I think as humanity, and as I've come to know you, John Michael, I think we share a very similar passion and caring for humanity and what's unfolding on our planet. And that's why I'm here, wanting to connect with you, and we'll see what happens.
Good. Well, thank you. That's a good introduction. And there's so much more that we could say, and I'm sure we'll weave it in, having to do with the last year and the so-called pandemic and how we connected around that. But I'll just say briefly around myself, so those who don't know me, I was raised in New Hampshire and left for 20 years, came back. I went to Harvard for undergrad, studied psychology, and at that point in time, it was rats and pigeons and other things that did not really appeal to me. I was like, hey, where's the soul here? Where's the soul? I remember in my sophomore year doing some kind of study on alpha brain waves, and people were like, what? Like, consciousness, man. But that's because I had read, the Aquarian Conspiracy
Mhm.
and, Carlos Castaneda and a bunch of other
Classics.
people, and Buddhism and a bunch of other things that really fascinated me at that time, because the basic question, kind of like what you were asking yourself, is what is life? What are we actually here to do? And what are we actually doing?
Mm.
And it all, a good friend in college who used to call it unreality, what was happening around us. It's the reality that's unreality. Everyone's kind of pursuing, wealth and materialism, but it's not really the point, and it doesn't seem to have any depth to it. So, I went through a lot of change then, having been raised Catholic, and once I got to, out of that system, was like, wow. And it was, a lot of it was then recovery, from the trauma of, guilt, a 24/7 guilt, shame,
Mhm.
fear, on many different levels. And over the course of times, started looking for alternatives, connected with the Monroe Institute, which was at that point when I connected, uh, doing experiential journeys using HemiSync, which is, as you know, since you went there too, it's a brain synchronizing technology just based on sonic frequencies, slightly different frequencies in each ear that create a resonant frequency within the brain, which can help people access different consciousness states, different states of focus, meditation, creativity. And at that point, I was really, really shy and very internalized. And I had a profound experience when I was at Monroe Institute, of flying over a field of poppies, or what appeared to be poppies, and them popping open as I was flying over the field.
Mm.
And the message was, many doors will open. And it was just, if you continue along the path and keep facing your fears, things will
Mhm.
open up for you. So, take heart. And it's true. That's what happened when I became involved in training that technology. Did a lot of writing over the years. Did Spent time doing healing work, or what I called healing facilitation, a different form of midwifery, right? Just another form of it.
Yeah.
Most of it mostly just involving listening, but also teaching people how to sort of untangle
Mm.
their body metaphors, things that were lodged from the past in their
Yeah.
bodies, and trying to get free, and working with um, the apparent contradiction, or the paradox of, the safer you are, the more you can feel, and the more you can feel, the more you can get in touch with the parts of you that never felt safe. So,
That's right.
which may be kind of uh, where we are. Getting into again, because, in a way, we have a very advanced culture for where we've been comparatively, with a lot of safety comparatively,
Mhm.
even though we can certainly point to areas of the world that aren't safe. But before we get into that, I'll just finish my story. I spent time in not the nonprofit world, and worked with folks in New Hampshire here, trying to get rid of the death penalty, which we were able to do in 2019, finally. And then found myself, cast into the waters of COVID. And
Mm.
when that happened, I still considered myself, basically uh, a critical thinker and a progressive. And I really don't think I'm not a progressive, but I started looking at things, and looking at the narrative that I was seeing coming from people who I thought should know better. When, for example, President Trump said, there might be some value to hydroxychloroquine. He didn't say everybody run out and take it. He didn't say anything like that. He said it looks promising, and I was like, and then I looked at everybody on the left saying he's full of it, and
Mhm.
that couldn't be. And I looked at the newspapers saying there's nothing to it, and look how dangerous that thing is. And I said, well, let me do my own research.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of the next phase of my disabusement of my prior filter bubble, in which, I will admit and confess that, having been a progressive and, lefty, as it were,
Mhm.
that, I looked over at the right, and I was like, you know, I mean, I knew a lot of people on the right, so it wasn't like, um, it wasn't like I dismissed the entire people, but I looked at their arguments. I'm like, yeah, that's, those are those people over there. They, I think the famous phrase was, people on the right, people on the left can imagine a world where everybody belongs, sort of the big tent. People on the right can imagine a world where people like them belong and other people really don't. And that was I sort of felt that was a truism, and you could certainly point to people who would maybe better represent that, but that's just a stereotype. And as I started questioning things related to COVID and started really doing the research that's really started with hydroxychloroquine and the PCR test and everything that was being touted as, bad or in the case of the former, or ironclad in the case of the latter, I discovered that things were not as they said. And over the course of time, I discovered that a lot of what I came to see as being more truth-based, more fact-based, were things that people increasingly on the right were also resonating with as being more truth. And there's this thing called Trump derangement syndrome, which is really just a description for anything that falls within the frame of anything that Trump has said, or anything that people who follow him and maybe don't even necessarily approve of everything he does, but there might be some lineup here. Well, anything like that, people on the left generally, and this is left-leaning media, New York Times, CNN and MSNBC would just say that's full of crap, and anyone who believes that is crazy. And I'm looking at hydroxychloroquine, I'm looking at Dr. Didier Raoult in France, I'm looking at Dr. Zev Zelenko here in the United States, a bunch of other doctors who've been using hydroxychloroquine with COVID patients with great success, and oftentimes in combination with other things like zinc and azithromycin or some other antibiotic. And I was looking at how the press was suppressing that. I looked at Google, and I'm like, and you do a little search, first few pages of results are hydroxychloroquine is bad, or it kills, or maybe just neutral results. And then as time goes on, I'm looking at research, and I'm looking at how.
Didn't I see somewhere that for 60 years it's been used in Africa, and they have the lowest death rate, and they have it like candy there. People walk around with it in their pockets.
Exactly. It's I think Dr. Simone Gold calls it a Sunday thing.
Yeah. Sunday, yeah.
Every Sunday, they pull it out and take it. And so, yeah, if you look at the African countries and other countries that don't have a limit on hydroxychloroquine, you can get it over the counter. Their death rate is,
the lowest
% or lower than that of the rest of the world on a per million basis. So, anyways, I don't want to go too deeply into that, but just to say that, and this is kind of where I wanted to go with our conversation today, and scratch your head a little bit about what you've observed in terms of this. This hyperpolarization of these people are absolutely wrong, these people are absolutely right, and what I've seen, and both sides are kind of feeling attacked or put upon by the other side, and with this thing that I've come to see as kind of a hall of mirrors. Can you comment on how things got to be this hyperpolarized? Because I know you and I kind of have had our foot in both worlds, and we're like,
absolutely.
These are human beings. There's some of what they say is right. These are human beings. Some of what they say is right. But isn't there also a great amount of illusion and distortion and propaganda that's kind of running a narrative that helps to dehumanize each side, and especially now?
Well, absolutely. There are a couple of things that pop into my mind as you're sharing that, and I'm going to go back to actually when I was in the Vietnam, during that time period, because having grown up as a conservative and right wing and, conservative, not radical, but definitely conservative. But a lot of my friends and my college buddies were all liberal. And I recognized within myself, and then when I started to look at, well, what is it a liberal believes? What is it a conservative? And, it's, if you look at it, within me, I had both. There's certain things I'm conservative in, and certain things I'm very liberal in. So at that time, what I decided politically, at least, when they say, well, you know, you're Democrat or Republican, I said, no, I'm independent. You know that, and I could never figure out why that didn't have more leverage as we progressed as a community, as a culture, where there's a room for just being present to all the good and things that don't work, and it's a personal thing, inside job. So the one thing I've used when I was teaching up at Burlington College in some of my metaphysical classes was this beautiful image that has always resonated with me, and it seemed like a lot of the kids that I was working with got it. I said, you know, it's almost as if, and picture this, picture that the left right now, okay? They're all, say they're the color red, just to screw it up, right? And let's say that all the conservatives, all the Trumpers, right? And they're going to be the color blue. Now, the truth is that we are all light, which has all those colors. But if you're living your life in a belief system or a country or a school or an environment where all the reality is just that color, there's nothing bad about the color, it's just the color, but it's not connected to life, which includes all the colors, all the dimensions, all the realities, and we get to choose. And so it's almost as if we, humanity, has created this virus and this dramatically separate, polarized response around the world to come to a different point of realization about who we are and what our purpose is here, and how to be in a community, how to be creative, how to be empowered, how to be healthy. And it's not dependent on these separate colors or separate dimensions, if you will. It's an integration of truth within our own hearts. And that's the point of self-discovery, which I think each person is going through their own personal experience of this. Mm-hmm. And how can we facilitate, as you're speaking very well about having conversation, perhaps looking at some other perspectives. You know, it doesn't make you wrong, but we get into this right and wrong, again, the duality, which prevents us from learning, from growing. So I don't know, that's initial thoughts.
I absolutely get that. I think it's a good way to put it. Reminds me of something my father said yesterday when I was having this conversation with him. And he said, hey, when we were kids, there was no conversation about Democrats and Republicans. It was just people in the community, and we all kind of worked together. And especially when there was a great need, of course, he, you know, came up in the, you know, he was born in 1932, and so he was raised in that period of time.
Depression and all of that.
You know, after the crash of '29, and so during the Depression and pre-war and World War II period, where there was much more of a sense of a, you know, of the common good, the common, you know, the good faith in your fellow human being, and you know, some of what we've seen in responses to something like 9/11, where if you recall directly after that, especially for the people right in New York, you know, the idea of class division just kind of evaporated, and everyone's, you know, kind of like, you know, looking out for each other. Do you have what you need? How are you know, are you safe? You know, you're happy to, there's a safety in realizing that we're part of a community. We're in this thing together.
Yes.
And there's a few things I noted to my father yesterday that I'd like to put out to you and get your thoughts about some of what may have provoked this partisan hyperpolarization, aside from what we've noticed probably over the course of history, which is that the parties, national parties, are cartels that are kind of run with
power structures.
More recently, I would say that the Republican Party is big oil, and the Democratic Party is Wall Street. You know, it's a very shorthand kind of way of looking at it. But we saw what happened, for example, in the post 2008 crash, where you know, Wall Street essentially was given tons and tons of money. Main Street wasn't helped at all. People in, you know, high positions in Wall Street, you know, got jobs with the Obama administration, And that, in my review, resulted in the populist backlash across the world, really, with Brexit and with Trump and everything else.
Maybe they should
To-
follow the money around COVID and all the things happening around that to see who's
Well,
making.
we can go there, but we
I
don't
know,
have time.
but I want to
today
get back to your
probably
dad.
cover all of this. Let me just throw out this first thing that I noticed. I want to get your thought on this.
Mhm.
That since 1995, we've had the internet. Now, before that, we maybe 10 years, maybe around before that. I'm not sure when we started to have these 24/7 news stations. And one thing that I believe is going on right now is that the human nervous system, I think,
Mhm.
is not designed to see everything that's happening around the world all at once and to see it continuously replayed
Mhm.
again and again and again and again. I mean, in the old days, you might read a newspaper about something that happened. You might have seen a picture, maybe you saw a clip on, Walter Cronkite or something, but you would talk to your neighbors, talk to your family,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't have to keep reliving and reseeing. And you wouldn't, people wouldn't be dredging up, oh, that time in 1982 when you did blackface and therefore we must throw you out of office in 2020 because.
Right.
So can you comment on this, like the human nervous system adaptation to
Well, I
a
mean,
unique
yeah,
time in history with this, this kind of exposure to maybe the rawest, and because that's what sells news, right? The most raw, difficult things to see is what we're looking at 24/7.
well, there's a lot of dimensions to the question you're asking, of course. And one of the things that popped in when you were saying that is, you probably remember the name better than I do, but who's the fellow that did the experiment with the people in the caves where they only saw the shadow?
Well, it's Plato's case, right?
Plato's
It was
cave.
Plato's initial. I mean, now you're going back a few
You're going back. I'm
millennia,
going
but
back.
yeah, no, it hasn't changed really.
It hasn't changed, right?
Yeah.
And certainly, having been in the military, I had friends actually. Stan Groff was an amazing guy that was out at Esalen Institute for a while. He worked at the Maryland Psychiatric Institute, and I have friends who were former government people working in psychiatric areas of military, and there's mind control. And if you sit in front of anything 8 hours a day, and that's all you're doing, guess what? That's getting programmed into your cells. I mean, we're bioelectric beings, okay? And we have this thing that they call the reptilian brain, fight and flight. And so when you start triggering fear continually, it's rewiring yourself. So you immediately go to safety. So if who you think is safe is giving you this narrative, then you're not going to look at anything else. And it's like you've never gotten out of the cave and you're sitting in front of that TV or talking to the same people every day. What I love about your path and my path is I've been blessed to be maybe open enough that I had friends on other sides and dimensions that I've learned from and respected and saying, wow, interesting, they're having that experience in this same event that we're looking at. I wonder where that comes from. I wonder what happened, something in their childhood. Was there something that they learned in school? But we're open to learning and exploring and growing together in the fact that we're unique. So we're, in a sense, we're all going through one experience, having unique, separate experiences of that one experience.
Let me ask that question in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Do we live in one world or do we live in 7 billion worlds?
Well, I think that's a great question.
What is the balance between my personal experience, because we are sovereign beings, correct, and the collective experience, and what is my responsibility for? I know this is the big question. We're probably not going to get to it in 20 sessions, but what, just sort of,
Okay.
to just extemporize on that. Yeah.
So you're a epidermal cell in your body, and you're part of this whole body. So you're having your own unique experience and job within the whole. So we are all individual cells energetically contributing. It's like throwing a pebble into the pond when you have a thought or a word or say something. It's energy. We're bioelectric. That's who we are. So that is having an influence everywhere. So we are one, and we have this individual frequency, I guess is the best word that comes to me. That is John Michael's frequency, which is a little bit different than my frequency. But when we're in a community, then we have a frequency of the community, like New England Patriot community, you know, that's a frequency of itself, comprised of separate vibrations within that.
Right, right. And interesting, I can imagine that the fans of the New England Patriots are, you know, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians,
There you go.
Green Party member. I mean, they probably span. And so we do end up finding ourselves in these. And I like the fact that you brought up the idea of a team, because I often think it's like, you know, a team is, you know, a voluntary, you know, kind of almost an agorist kind of idea. You're voluntarily joining with these other people who, it doesn't matter what they believe. It doesn't matter the color of their skin.
They're black or white, 6'9" or 5'2".
Right. Now, some of those variations may determine roles, right?
Yeah.
But in the ultimate,
but when it all works in sync,
yeah, and
there's
so
success.
and there's a goal that is iterated and agreed to among those voluntary teammates, and they get to work together and to something else. Or I think of, you know,
think about humanity like that.
From the 60s, you know, no, not from bands going back, you know, decades and decades of, you know, having
you're going to have a band, but
members, you know,
but no drummer. What do you do? You know,
Latinos.
how can you have a successful band with no drummer, or a football team with no quarterback, or no kicker, or center to hike the ball?
Right.
Each of us has a very important, special role in our lives, in the world, and if we can work together, then there's success.
Yeah.
But if you know, saying, well, you know, you're black and I'm white, and so we can't really work together. So I'm going to let that player tackle you. You know, I mean, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah, and it's self-evidently not going to work.
Yes.
Once you enter into the agreement of what the parameters of the game are, what the goals are, right? It becomes self-evident. And well, and that, you know, I think we can maybe tackle, that's a huge subject in and of itself, which I think is worthy, because we, in a way, wouldn't you say, there's been a kind of a balkanization, a huge silo creation from this 24/7 news cycle. Yeah. Now we've got social media, which those of us who are looking at it and, you know, listening to the people warning us about the downside, recognize that social media is run by artificial intelligence algorithms, which feed into outrage and the things that will get clicks, which increases the balkanization or the tribalization of the things that we're likely to listen to. We'll get fed back in terms of the feed in YouTube or on our Facebook or Twitter feed, the things that reinforce our worldview. And increasingly that, you know, that identitarian approach causes us to see the people on the other side. That's the battle now that's being presented to us as if it were the real battle.
And I have another image that just popped in as you're speaking. Think of a pyramid, okay? Where is the power and control in our world? Okay, is it you and me? Or is it who controls money? Who controls the TV programming that we're getting 6 and 8 hours a day? Is it the people that are controlling our health? Is it the people that are controlling curriculum? And so if you think about it, if they're in control, the truth is that the rest of the pyramid is bigger and stronger. But if you're just in alignment, then there's no room for change. And I go back to my earliest awareness in my journey. Life is change. Every cell in our body changes every instant. In 7 years, you're a whole brand new physical person except for your teeth. Life is constant change. But if we're in a control matrix, people are not free to grow, to change, to create. And I think this is what we're up against right now. This is the opportunity that we have right now.
Well, I don't know if, I think it was Mark Twain who said it's much easier to control a person than to convince them they are being controlled.
Oh, nice.
Right. So
Yeah.
there is, it's interesting. I sent you around a quote this morning about, I think I can't remember exactly what it was about, but it had to do with um, a certain quality right now that I think we're seeing a lot of institutions and positions of power and people who believe in what they say,
Mhm.
using that embedded authority to kind of dismiss anything that's not, a fallacy of, to basically just dismissing anything that doesn't fit under there without necessarily having to prove anything they're saying. It's just because people happen to believe that. And, this is part of that mindset, I think, of, down here,
Mhm.
if you're still being controlled, but you don't want to see that you're being controlled, there's a great amount of safety in let's say putting yourself under under the apex of the control system. There's safety because we've seen now that doctors that are stepping out of line and saying, hey, we think that uh, that herd immunity is a thing, that we can reach it with focused protection of those people relative to COVID, focused protection of those people who we know are the elderly with comorbidities, and let other people go about their lives without the restrictions that we've seen. Children have a 99.997% survival rate under 20. People under 50, it's much less than the flu in terms of the danger. Even people under 70,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
about the flu, and it's only 65 on where there's danger. But even then, right? So how is, and we're people are having arguments with our local newspaper, which just more or less
So
came out and said, you're crazy if you
here's a
believe any
here's
of those people, right?
here's a magic wand.
Yeah.
This magic wand, we're changing all of reality so that all of a sudden the reality is going to be all the media, all the systems we're going to go back in time to last spring when COVID first came out. And what they're going to start putting out there is all of the things people can do to stay healthy and well. They're going to give the truth about hydrochloroquine, ivermectin, vitamin D, vitamin C. They're going to let everybody in the world know about that. What do you think those curves, if anything, would ever come out compared to what we're being sold a bill of goods now? Is everyone's going to have to get all these frigging vaccines that are unknown, untried,
Right.
unreal.
Well, the estimate is about 50% reduction in deaths. Now, admittedly, it varies quite a bit across the world, but we actually are in, as you stated earlier, we're kind of in probably the most, it's the first really global experiment, the health experiment, because we have very large population being infected all over the world.
Of 1% reduction, so that's a 0.5%. That's great.
Yeah.
But what about the 4% of the world population that are dying from suicide, fear, social isolation? I have friends right now I was talking to yesterday pulling their kids out of school because the kids are so stressed they're having to see psychiatrists because they don't have kids around them. The remote learning is failing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and the food systems, the businesses are closing, families. I mean, this is not the right approach. I'm sorry. It's just common sense. It's not the right approach.
And it's interesting that, again, because of Trump derangement syndrome, anyone who seems to be supporting this notion of focused protection and opening up is seen to be, wanting people to die, when really, as you're saying, it's really the opposite, that people are dying because of the lockdowns.
Right.
And the real sad part is, it's not that I'm saying I am absolutely right or those doctors are right. And I'm reading doctors every day, epidemiologists, virologists,
40,000
who, by the
physicians.
way, they don't agree with the WHO or the CDC's line. They're just getting, their stuff is getting just taken right off of social media. And it's like there is this huge middle ground which people need to be aware of so they can
Right.
make informed decisions, right?
Exactly.
And it's
Exactly.
like if you say that there's only one truth, and if you don't believe in that truth, people will die and you're a bad person, there's no intellectual honesty in that position.
Right.
There's no choice. There's no
Right.
there are no possibilities
Right.
for other ways of doing it. And you do have to come back around to asking cui bono, right? Who's benefiting financially, especially,
Right.
and so it's kind of sad that things have gotten to that place, because I think the truth is being sacrificed on the altar of certainty, and for many people who are believing the traditional or the mainstream line, who are not seeing these things and who are looking at this largely untested vaccine, are going, this is what I need to do. I need to do this thing.
Right. I
And
think more and more people are starting to question things like that. And I'm an optimist, and I do feel honestly that it's had to get to this point for people to start waking up to
yeah,
their own life, their own beliefs, their own happiness, their own health.
yeah,
And what is it within that? I've spent 40, 45 years in the healthcare field, and prevention is the name of the game. And I talk to people all the time. I say, look, on a physical level, you're 99.97% water on a cellular level. That's what you are, water. So what kind of water are we putting into ourselves? You look at Nestle, you look at these companies that are buying up water rights and land around the world. They know water is the key to life.
yeah,
The rest of you is bacteria. So 80% of your immune system is based on how effective your gut is working. Brain health. I worked in the nonprofit elder care for years, dementia, Alzheimer's. Change the diet, get them properly hydrated, get the gut balance. You see positive results. Start there. And
so
then body, mind, emotion, and spirit. Have some kind of practice where you can deal with stress, because we all get to deal with that. Exercise, whatever it is. I'm not telling you what kind, but your body needs to move. Keep things, blood flow, oxygen moving. A diet, if you can eat locally grown food, support your local farmers instead of buying the stuff that's coming on truckloads and container ships from China and Africa, and probably has very minimal nutritional value by the time you've cooked it in a microwave and put it in your body. But I mean, it's not rocket science. This
yeah,
is, but again, it feels like the system I grew up in, I never learned about this.
right,
I kind of just followed because I was a good boy. I was an older son. I wanted to follow what my school teachers said. But as part of my own awakening, I've really begun to explore and
right,
encourage other people, which I think is the very thing you're saying is, I'm not trying to tell people to believe anything I say.
right,
However, I ask you to take a look at the choices you're making. Where are they coming from? Is it from fear? Is it from a belief that you read in a book or your friend told you something? Is it real? Check it out. Spend enough care for yourself and your kids
yeah,
and your community to do some research and connect with other people, get other views, then come up with something and go with your heart. That's the end of the game. Your heart is key. If it says yes in your heart, then go for it. You can't blow this. You're
so
going to
for the
learn from your
people,
mistakes.
all good, all very good advice. And it implies or presupposes, right, that people are giving themselves this space for reflection, time, energy, space.
Mhm.
And what would you say to people who have been um, most influenced by the 24/7 death, disease, panic that we've had for the last 9 months, who don't feel like there's the space to do that? Like, oh, if I had time, I would pay attention to prevention,
Who's
but
in charge of your time?
we can't,
Who's
we
in
can't.
charge? I'm sorry. You can find 8 minutes in the day instead of having that third beer at home watching the evening news.
Yeah,
Go out and walk in nature.
yeah,
Move your body. Get a different environment that is going to be much more connected to the world, to everything, and give yourself a chance. I remember earlier my relationship with my wife, Winsong here. We get into some arguments when we were first together, and instead of sitting there and going at it, time out. Let's go for a walk. Go out and walk and talk. You're moving your body. You're moving your energy. You're
Yeah.
getting oxygen to the brain, you're exercise. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And
But
you're
if you
side by
sit-
side, and you're side by side, you're not facing
Yeah,
each other in kind of a battle,
yes.
different, right?
And you're not um, dwelling and sitting about, oh, blah, 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 blah. So many people chew on that bone, the old dog on the bone, for days, weeks, months, years. They've never gotten over a divorce or something did to them in grade school. Well, that energy is still in your body. It's still in your mind. It's still informing your emotional response to things going on now in your life.
Mm,
So as people are able to just say, time out for a minute. I'm going to go take an Epsom salt bath, do something nice for my body.
mm.
I'm going to take a walk in the woods. I'm going to call up a friend and just have a conversation. I'm going to take those 10 minutes. Find the time. You're in charge of your reality.
Right. So let's go back as I want to maybe keep this to about an hour today.
Yeah, sure.
Let's
Sure,
go back to weaving some of what you're talking about in, but let's go back to this notion of having conversations with the people in our lives with whom we may not agree, with whom there
Mhm.
seems to be this great gulf of what maybe you could call even basis of what's a factual thing. There
Yeah.
seems to be a basic disagreement here. When it comes to maybe COVID and people are on different sides, and maybe some people are talking like you're talking,
Mhm.
but they're encountering family members who can't hear any of it. What would you say
Yeah.
to
Well,
those people?
again, I'll give credit to my wife, Winsong. I mean, she was a body mind therapist for many, many years. And we had a family member who got outraged, pissed off, anger like I've never seen.
Mm.
And it was because we weren't going to get vaccinated. So,
They're angry at you for not getting vaccinated,
mhm.
the flu shot or something like that. Yeah.
So, how do you deal with a situation like that? Someone you love, someone that's, a family member.
Right.
And part of it is you take some space. And then if they're open to having a conversation, because typically in a family, there's at least a willingness to engage at some level.
Mm.
What we were able to do, and this is where Winsong comes in, is we agreed to disagree. So there's still love and respect. We may not like our decision. We may not believe in what we're saying. We don't want to hear it. So we'll honor that. But we've come to this, I think of it like a seesaw, up here or down here. What's the integration point? What's the point of balance here in this dichotomy, which allows us to continue energetically having connections, doing things that are fun, exploring, maybe doing some research. So that agree to disagree can be a starting point for some people. Some people aren't even able to get there.
Sure.
That's one
Sure.
that is useful for people to consider.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Catherine Austin Fitts has said, relative to the flip side of that, which is when you as an older person might be looking at your children and their
Mhm.
plan to vaccinate, and they're like saying keep off, but she's saying that, hey, if they get a vaccine injury, which is not just a tiny possibility, but it is, increasingly,
Yeah.
we know now that children today in
Mhm.
the United States, about half of them end up with some kind of chronic or developmental disease by the time they're 18. It's that's the real epidemic in my view. But what she's saying is, hey, you could say nothing, but in reality, you're probably going to be helping to pay forever for the care of that child, because it's like some great millions of numbers of dollars
Yeah.
to really caretake a child who has these issues. It can cost a great amount. So, and I'm not saying that's a clear and obvious thing, but how do you talk to
Yeah.
people who you're seeing that might be endangering themselves? I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, I'm not going to take a flu shot, and you really can't tell me about
Mhm.
their children or themselves, and you're looking at this flu shot, this
Again,
COVID shot or something.
language. You invite people to consider
Yeah,
the choice they're making, and if they're open to hearing your own experience. I
yeah,
mean, I had vaccinations. My kids had vaccinations early on.
yeah,
I would never take one today because I know differently.
Yeah.
I've done my research and I've consulted with doctors and physicians, virologists, and people that understand what a vaccine is and what it isn't, understand about germ theory and a lot of things about my body.
Right.
So what I do in that kind of situation is say, look, we love and care about you and our grandchild dearly. We'd hate to see anything happen. Just like if you were going to be drinking 2 cases of beer and driving your car, we'd say something. So we want you to know there's dangers and risks here. Have you read the label? Have you talked to your physician? Have you asked them this series of questions? If you're willing to do that and you still want to do it, it's your child, it's your choice. We'll still love you and love your child. But at least consider, we invite you to consider taking a deeper look at this.
Mhm. Mm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes your response is, no, I don't want to hear it, And then you trust. Every soul has its own journey.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to run out into traffic, even though they've been told, don't, look both ways. Their soul path is their soul path. Freedom. That's so important right now.
Mhm.
People should be free to make their choices. I mean, as long as it's not killing somebody, hurting somebody,
Mhm.
but freedom versus free will is another whole topic would be great to have with you. But I think
Sure.
for me, it's again, honoring the people are making the best choice they can, and you want to help them with information you have in your experience. You'd like to share that or ask them to share it with their physician. That's kind of, in my mind, what we can do.
Good. Good.
I don't know.
So any final thoughts here as we, we're doing this on January 19th, which is the day before the Biden inauguration. And
International Popcorn Day.
indeed, indeed.
I think there's a movie playing out here, and don't get us going. We'll go into hour 2. That is going to be quite amazing on every level, no matter what polarity you may be coming at. There's some waking up, I think, happening here very, very shortly. So I think it's auspicious that International Popcorn Day, we did it.
Indeed, indeed. Well, but just in terms of maybe just you're putting it in a capsule thought here as we kind of wrap up a little bit.
Great.
What would you want to say when if you're kind of like looking at it both sides? There's a lot of fear and anger. There's right now we're seeing increasing amounts of language about canceling and censoring and deprogramming, separating out, making sure those people never get there's a lot of that kind of fear and loathing, if you could say, on both sides. And if you could just, speak to a group of them all at once, what might you say to, invite them to a new conversation? We're going to name this the Great Invitation.
Okay, this is the Great Invitation.
Okay, good.
So the Great Invitation is, and this is something that everyone can look at, is to consider going back to the beginning of time. Whenever there's been a war, winners and losers, who has won and who has lost ultimately? We all lose when there's separation and control. There's value in every living thing, including viruses. We don't live without them. They're billions of years old. Everything in life has value. So if you in your heart would treat someone else like you'd like to be treated, no matter their beliefs, no matter their skin color, no matter their sexual orientation, they're a human being having their own experience, a valuable experience that we could learn or perhaps help with. What would you choose? To keep going down this radical approach of shaming and knocking people off and removing media and not speaking? How is that ever going to get you closer to who you truly are and to our communities and what they can truly be? This isn't it. War has proven that over and over. Okay, there are no victors. This is the illusion of it. The war is what keeps you distracted from the very essence of creating, which is who we are, creator beings. What is it you want to create in your life? Let's focus on that.
Yeah. And I'll just underscore, see each other as human beings.
Mm.
If you if you just put aside, right, this notion of, Rumi said that out beyond notions of right and wrong, there's a field.
Yeah.
Let's meet there.
Let's
Let's
meet there.
talk. And, you're not giving yourself up. You're not
Right.
abandoning
You
your
can have your
truth
beliefs,
by,
right?
by opening up and listening. You can disagree, but you can listen respectfully and with curiosity about what's going on, because there's so much more than fits in our philosophy Horatio or whatever that line was. So I really appreciate the time that you spent with me today. I kind of
I
feel
love
like this has been an invitation to a much larger conversation that I'm hoping people will engage with, because there's so much life, beyond the apparent walls and,
Right.
and locked doors that we're seeing in front of us. There's pretty much everything exists beyond the conceptions that we would place upon them, and that world is calling to us. And I'd like us to focus, in some future episodes, if we do this again, upon what that emerging world is. What is calling us, because I don't think it's like anything we've seen before. I think we're kind of at a unique place. I think it's beyond capitalism, communism, or socialism. It's beyond left and right. And I think I'll just leave it there for today and say, if we pick it up again, let's start talking about what's really knocking at our door here, because it's profound.
Wonderful. Sounds perfect. I'm with you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate
Thanks for the great invitation.
All right. And save some popcorn for me if you would.
You got it.
All right,
Talk
that's
soon.
good. Take care.
Bye.